Good evening, viewers and listeners of Concerned Citizens Media. Thank you again for coming back. I always appreciate your presence. A little bit chilly here. We got the first snow for December. So I have several updates to share with you. I will start with a video about the peace deal in Kenya and Kenya's former president planned visit to Mekele, Tigray. Next to that, I have Ethiopians living, especially in the capital city, Addis Ababa, urgent cry for help due to uncontrolled inflation on the market. So after these two videos, I will continue with reading news updates. So thank you again. Today is December 22nd, 2022. We are just 8 days away from the new year, 2023. Thank you. Let's listen.
For French newspaper Le Monde, when do you expect to be in Mekele?
I don't want to mention specific dates, but let's say before the end of this month. That's why I said in a few days' time. But the true statement that they need to make will be the statement they make when we are in Mekele in the next few days, observing and verifying the actions. Because documents are one thing. What we want now is the deliverables. They have all concurred and agreed to give the monitoring and verification team of the African Union
former president
full
of Kenya, Uhuru Kenyatta,
access,
and the
full
mediator,
360-degree viewpoint to ensure that all the elements of the agreement are actually going to be implemented.
What will you do with your newfound freedom? That's shopping made fast and easy, only in the Amazon app.
Okay, this is in Amharic. About the challenge Ethiopians are facing under Abiy Ahmed's administration.
ዘይቱ አንድ ጊዜ ቀነሰ ሲል መልሶ እዛው ነው እና እንግዲህ እግዚአብሔር አዋቂ ነው። እዚያ ያደረሰ እንዴት አሱኑ መለመን ነው እንጂ የኑሮው ነገር የያዝነው ገንዘብ ረድኤት የለው። ገበያ ገብተን ምኑ ከምን ለማትረባው እንግዲህ ሽብር ይዘሽ ገብተሽ አንድ ፌስታል ዕቃ ነው ይዘሽ የምትሄጂው።
በጣም ከሚገባ በላይ ኑሮ ተወዷል። አልቻልንም፣ መኖር አልቻልንም። ራሱ እየጨመረ ነው በቃ የሚሄደው። ቤተሰብ ያለው አለ፣ የሌለው አለ።
ካብታም translation after the video, so they just talking about how life is difficult
ምንም መገለጫ የለውም። ጉዳይ በአሁኑ ሰዓት ያለው ሁኔታ በጣም በሚያሳዝን ሁኔታ ሁሉም እየቀጠለ ያለበት ነው። ቅናሽ የሚባል ነገር አይታሰብም።
ዘይት 1 ሺህ ምናምን ብር ትገዣለሽ፣ ሽንኩርት 30 ብር፣ ቲማቲም 30 ብር፣ እንደዛ ያረግሽ እዚህ ጋር የምትሰሪበትን ሁላ ነው አውጥተሽ እዛ ጋር አጻፊውና የምሮድነቱ ለሁሉም ከባድ ነው።
የፍጆታ ምርቶች ዋጋ በየዕለቱ ከፍተኛ የሆነ የዋጋ ጭማሪ እያሳዩ መሆናቸውን የሚያነሱት ሸማቾቹ የሚያገኙት ገቢ ላይ ለውጥ ባለመኖሩ ምክንያት የሚያስፈልጋቸውን ምርት መግዛት እየተሳናቸው መሆኑን ተናግረዋል።
በበጋ እየጨመረ በክረምት ደግሞ ረጠብጠብ ሲል እኮ ይቀንሳል። እንዲህ አይነት ነገር የለም። ከፍ ካለ ከፍ ነው። እስኪ ዛሬ ገብቷልና ወረድ እናርገው የለም። በገበያው ደረጃ ሁሉም ይሄ ነው የሚባል ነገር የለም። ምን ቅናሽ አለ? ምንም ቅናሽ የለው። እዚህ ጋር ይገዛሽን እዛ ጋር ጨምሮ የምታገኝበት ስለሆነ አንዱ ሱቅ ያገኝሽን አንዱ ጋር አታገኝም። የዋጋ ለውጥ አለ። ከፍታው እየጨመረ ነው የሚሄደው። ቅናሽ የሚባል ነገር አይታሰብም።
nothing cheaper, everything is increasing.
ከበፊቱ ጋር አሁን በጣም ተጋነነ ተብሎ የሚባለው እነዚህ ውጭ ቅመም የሚባሉት ናቸው። ማለት ይሄ ጋውዝ፣ ቀረፋ እና ቅርንፉድ ቅርንፉዷን በጣም የተጋነነ ዋጋ የሚባለው 1300 ብር፣ ሄል 2200 ብር ገብቷል። ሌላ ቆንጆ በርበሬ 550 ብር ነው። ገውዝ 700 ብር፣ ጥምዝን 900 ብር። እነዚህ ናቸው በጣም ጭማሪ ያሳዩት።
ነው 750 800 ነው። ይለያያል። ለጋና ማዕከለኛ ልዩነት አለ። ሌላ ደግሞ ትሊሊ 700 ብር ነው። በሳል 700 ብር ነው።
ቡላ ደረቅ ቡላ 200 ብር፣ እርጥብ የታጠበ 170 ብር። እነሱ ናቸው።
high price of different items.
አሁን በርበሬ ራሱ
Spices, butter.
የለም። ያው ገበሬው የሚልሽ ተቃጥሏል ምርት የለም ነው የሚልሽ። በጣም እንደዛው
የዋጋ መለዋወጡ ተጽዕኖ ሸማቹ ላይ ብቻ አላበቃም። ነጋዴዎችም ቢሆኑ እንደ ልብ ምርት አስገብቶ መሸጥና የምርቶቹም ዋጋ መቀያየር ፈተና እንደሆነባቸው ነው የሚናገሩት።
ሰው በፊት በ1 ሺህ ብር ይዘው ብዙ አይነት ዕቃ ገዝቶ መሄድ ይችል ነበረ። አሁን በ1 ሺህ ብር ግፋ ቢል ወይ 2 አይነት 3 አይነት ዕቃ ሊገዛ የሚችለው እሱን በጣም አቻችሎ ሩብ ኪሎ ምናምን አድርገው ማለት ነው። እና ያ ገበያም እንዲቀንስ አድርጓል፣ እኛም እንዳልባችን እንዳንንቀሳቀስ አድርጓል። ሲቀጥል ደግሞ ከካፒታልም ደረጃ በፊት አሁን በ20 ሺህ ብር የምትፈልጊውን ዕቃ ይዘሽ ትመጫለሽ ከመርካቱ። አሁን በ20 ሺህ ብር 2 ዕቃ እንኳን ይዘሽ አትመጭም። ይሄም በራሱ ትልቅ ተጽዕኖ አለው።
የኑሮ ውድነቱ ይሄ ነው የሚባል አይደለም። ምክንያቱም ሲጨምር 100 ብር ነው፣ ሲቀንስ 10 ብርና 15 ብር ነው። ከዛ በታችም ቀንሶም አይሄድም። ምክንያቱም እዚህ ብቻ ሳይሆን ክፍለ ሀገርም ራሱ አሁን እኔ እስከ ሸኖ ሄዳለሁ። ክፍለ ሀገርም ውድ ነው፣ እዚህ ብቻ አይደለም። ስለዚህ አሁን ዘንድሮ ምንም የቀነሰ ነገር የለም።
አሁን በሸጥሽበት ነው ሄደሽ መልሰሽ እንደገና የምታመጪው። ወጣ ገባ ነው። አሁን ጠዋት ባገኘሽበት ከሰዓት በኋላ አታገኝም። እና ያው ነጋዴ መቼም የዕለት እንትኑ ነውና ኬትም ብሎ ተሟሙቶ ምንም ብሎ ገበሬውንም ተጨንቆ ምን ብሎ ያመጣል። እዚህ ጋር ደግሞ አምጥተሽ አሁን በላተኛው ያልተረዳው ለምንድን ነው? እርግጥ ነው እውነቱን ነው። በመቀነሻው ሰዓት አንድ ነገር ካልቀነሰለት ምንድነው ወቅታዊ የምትይው ነገር የሚለው ያሳስበዋል።
የኑሮ ውድነቱንና የፍጆታ ምርቶች የሚያሳዩትን የዋጋ ጭማሪ ለመግታት የተለያዩ የገበያ ማረጋጋት ስራዎች መሰራት እንዳለባቸውም ይጠቁማል።
መቀነስ ያለበት አልቀነሰም፣ እየቀጠለ የሄደበት ነው ያለው። መንግስት ነው ወረድ ብሎ አይቶ ያረጋጋልን፣ ሀገራችንን ሰላም ያርግልን።
መስመር ማስያዝ፣ ህግን ማስከበር፣ ቅጣት ከሆነ መቅጣት። አንዱ ሲቀጣ ጎረቤቱ ይደነግጣል። ያኛው ሲታሰራረ እኔም ነገ ጧት ይላል። እንደዚህ መረን የተለቀቀ ነገር ና ተመለስ ብትል ምንም እና ሰውም ህዝቡም ተቸግሯል።
ትልቅ ችግር ያለው አስመጪዎች ጋር ነው። ያንን መንግስት የሚፈለገውን ነገር አድርጎ ገበሬውና ነጋዴው ማቀራረብ ቢችል የተሻለ አማራጭ ይኖራል ብዬ አስባለሁ።
Okay.
Comoros will assume the chairman.
Okay, I will come back to the Comoros video. So that's a cry from Ethiopians about this uncontrolled inflation in the country. It's a desperate cry. They are crying for help, but I don't think there is help under Abiy Ahmed leadership. Let me read in short what they are saying. Prices of goods, basic items such as oil, onion, spice, extra, butter is unstable, and no one controls it. They cannot afford to sustain their lives even with salary they are getting. They're just praying to God to save them from such unprecedented inflation. They haven't know what they can do. They just pray for God to intervene. Low-income families are the one hit harder under current inflation rates, especially low-income family. Before they say you can buy a lot of items when you get 20,000 Ethiopian birr. Now you cannot buy more than 2 or 3 items with 20,000 Ethiopian birr. Such alarming inflation is not bound only to the capital city, Addis Ababa. It is everywhere in the country. So what are their recommendations? What help they are asking? Here are their recommendations. They pray for peace, for the country's peace. Yes, they are right. If there is peace, there is a chance to stabilize the supply demand on the market. They are right. So peace is very essential, very important. I don't know if the government is listening. The other recommendation, they say government must be in charge on such uncontrolled inflation crisis in Ethiopia. One, stabilize the market by subsidizing items. Another one, control price hikers, punish them for their criminal conduct. Increase direct engagement between producers or farmers and consumers. The last recommendation is facilitate or increase importing these basic consumption goods into the country. So that is a rough translation of those peoples on the video, their cry for urgent help in handling this highly uncontrolled inflation in Ethiopia. Ethiopians are very peaceful people, very peaceful. They also highly respect the government. That's why you can see they're just expressing frustration, and they are asking for government intervention and for God's help. If you see the Sudanese, they just protested against the price on the bread. Okay, so still they are protesting against the government, plus against the military-controlled administration. But the price inflation is the major problem in Ethiopia, and the Ethiopians are just praying for help from God and from their government. That's the difference. But if it's another country, you will see huge demonstration, anger against the government, demand change. But Ethiopians, they are not doing that. They are not taking such actions for now. We don't know what's going to happen in the future when the inflation keep increasing, and the people cannot afford to shop. So let's continue with other news. So this is about the situation in Oromia. This is against what the people are asking. The people are asking for stability, peaceful resolution, and for the peace in that country. But the Oromia region and the federal government, they are planning to wage a war, coordinated war in Oromia region. Let me read. Amidst growing calls to resolve Oromia conflict peacefully, government gears to conduct organized law enforcement measures. Law enforcement measures is a war, it's not law enforcement measure. The Oromia regional state has announced that it is preparing to take an organized law enforcement measure against rebel group Oromo Liberation Army, OLA, which it refers to as Shani, and called on the public to rally with security forces. A consultation meeting with local officials, regional and federal law enforcement bodies to bring lasting peace in Western Oromia cluster and the entire region was held on 21st December in Badelle town of Buno Badalle Zone in southwestern Oromia, according to regional broadcaster. Speaking at the meeting, the deputy president of the region, Awolu Abdi, said it would be worked with serious attention to ensure lasting peace in an organized law enforcement measures to be launched. Awolu added that it would be worked attentively to liberate areas under the control of Shane so as to eradicate it. One unnamed participant of the meeting said the public of Ilu Ababor, those from Darimu Warada in particular, are ready to use the opportunity provided by the government and fight the rebel group. This comes amid growing call on the government to resolve the conflict in the region peacefully. On 5 December, members of the Ethiopian parliament elected from the Oromia region said they submitted a letter to Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed and the senior leaders of the parliament urging the government, among other things, to make peace deal with Oromo Liberation Army, OLA, in the same manner it did with Tigrayan forces. The Oromos have suffered in lack of peace. Killings and displacements have continued. The difficult situations the Oromo people are facing have persisted for long and does not seem to have an end. MP Buzayo Dagafa said, adding that the peace that has been made in Tigray has to be replicated in Oromia, and the people should be able to live in peace. The opposition, Oromo Federalist Congress, OFC, in a statement released following the latest killings of civilians in East Wallagga, Oromia, called on the government to solve the conflict in the region through political dialogue and peaceful means. The United Nations Office for Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, OCHA, said last week that security situations and the humanitarian delivery to people in need in the Oromia regional state is fast deteriorating. Credit at this standard. So, despite the call for a peaceful resolution by 80 members of parliament representing different Oromia zones, now the government is using the country's limited resource to create more bloodshed in Oromia region. So that's the situation. They are not listening. These people are bloodthirsty, really. They are bloodthirsty. They are not ready for peaceful resolution to settle the issue. So they just spending the country's limited resource on drones and military hardware and creating unwanted bloodshed in that country. And, you know, that's the situation. They are not listening to the people. The people are looking for peaceful resolution. And, you know, as you see on the video on Addis Ababa situation, they are praying for peace, but no peace under Abiy Ahmed and those representing Oromia region. This one is about a statement by High Representative European EU. So this is a press release on behalf of EU. The European Union, EU, and its member states congratulate the government of Ethiopia and the Tigray People's Liberation Front, TPLF, for signing the agreement for lasting peace through a permanent cessation of hostilities, COHA, and for the subsequent declaration of the senior commanders on the modalities of the implementation of the COHA. The European Union also commends the African Union high-level panel for a successful mediation that led to this engagement, which represents an important step towards peace and reconciliation in Ethiopia. Implementing the COHA. Okay, sorry. Apologies. Implementation for cessation of hostilities requires leadership as well as a robust and sustainable monitoring mechanism to ensure, among other things, that the cessation of hostilities is respected by all sides, paving the way for recovery, reconstruction, and reconciliation. The AU welcomes the progress already made since the signing of the COHA and stands ready to support the implementation of the agreement. Massive humanitarian needs in northern Ethiopia as well as other parts of the country requires an adequate and well-coordinated response. The urgent needs of the populations affected by the conflict must be met. To this end, unimpeded humanitarian access to all in need and the full restoration of basic services in all areas are critical. Furthermore, the EU recalls the importance of an active, constructive, and effective cooperation with national and international human rights mechanisms. Throughout the conflict, the AU has continued its support to the Ethiopian population with the development assistance and humanitarian aid. The sustained implementation of the COHA enables the European Union to resume its strategic engagement with Ethiopia, including through political dialogue. Concrete progress on the implementation of the ceasefire, unimpeded humanitarian access, and accountability for international humanitarian law and human rights violations and abuses will allow the gradual re-establishment of the full spectrum of EU's development cooperation and economic support. Ethiopia's overall stability, sovereignty, and territorial integrity, as well as peaceful development, are key for the region and for the EU. The EU strongly calls on Ethiopia's regional neighbors to constructively contribute to the full implementation of the COHA. In this context, while underlining the importance of the 2000 Algiers Agreement and the 2018 peace declaration between Ethiopia and Eritrea, the AU reiterates its call for an immediate and complete withdrawal of Eritrean troops from Ethiopia. So that is AU High Representative's Office press release on Ethio-Tigray peace deal, and they are calling on Eritrean forces to immediately leave Tigray, but they left out the Amara militia and still occupying the western Tigray and carrying out atrocities. I don't know why. It's on purpose or they forgot. They call only on Eritreans to leave. And they ignored the Amaras for some reason. The Amara militia, Fano, who are the troublemakers in that country with expansionist agenda, taking more territories in Tigray and conducting all atrocities in Oromia and taking districts, still holding, thanks to the Abiy Ahmed and the Oromia region's representatives, because they allow them to displace thousands and thousands of Oromos and to control their land. Okay, this one is from Foreign Magazine, Foreign Affairs. It's talking about 4 major issues about Ethiopia. Ethiopia's peace deal, expose Abiy Ahmed's unfinished reform agenda. Economic stability can ensure the peace agreement holds, and for Tigrayans, there can be no lasting peace without accountability. Let me read this FEP, Foreign Affairs Magazine report on Ethiopia, or statement by different experts. It says, will Ethiopia's peace deal last? Is a question. Will Ethiopia's peace deal last? Without political reform, economic stability, and accountability, there is a risk conflict could resume. Economic stability, political reform, and accountability. If these things are not happen, there is a risk for the conflict to resume. That's their assessment. Foreign Policy Magazine. On November 2nd, Ethiopia's government and the Tigrayan rebels signed an expected peace deal aimed at ending 2 years of brutal war that drew in Ethiopia's erstwhile enemy turned ally, Eritrea, while ravaging the Tigray region and the surrounding areas, exacerbated ethnic tension, and damaging Addis Abeba's regional and global standing. Now that a deal has been signed, many questions remain. Will Ethiopia Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed's ambition reform agenda get back on track? That's the question. Will there be economic stability? Will there be accountability for the perpetrators of war crimes during the conflict? Foreign policy turned to a panel of experts to comment on the country's future. So these are a comment by different experts. Ethiopia's peace deal exposed Abiy Ahmed's unfinished reform agenda. This is by Addis Lashito. This is an expert writing about this one. Let me read what it says. When the conflict in northern Ethiopia escalated again this past August, few observers expected a quick resolution, but paradoxically, it ended with a peace agreement in November. Fighting the combined forces of Ethiopia's Federal Army, Amara regional militias, and Eritrean's military, the chances of the Tigray People Liberation Front, TPLF, prevailing in a long civil war were always minimal. By signing a peace deal in November, TPLF leaders appear to have been forced to give up arms by their untenable military position. That's right. The peace agreement may on its surface seem a humiliating defeat for the TPLF, a party that once ruled Ethiopia with an iron fist and played an outsized role as a regional power broker. However, it is also pragmatic recalibration that demonstrates the astuteness of the party's leadership. The deal gives the TPLF a second lease of life and an opportunity to realize politically what it failed to achieve militarily. Ethiopia's current constitution order, which was largely crafted by the TPLF after it came to power in 1991, allow the party to exercise significant autonomy in administering Tigray. It also divides Ethiopia into competing ethnic fiefdoms. I don't know what's fiefdoms. The simmering competition between the Amaras and the Oromos, which seems to keep Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed busy, may erupt one day, giving the TPLF a political upper hand. By ensuring its political relevance, the TPLF has hence proved wiser than the expectation of its Western acolytes, who had anticipated that it would go on to launch an insurgency. Overall, the TPLF played its few cards shrewdly. The agreement turns back the clock and places the TPLF at the same position that would have been in had it peacefully ceded power to Abiy's party prior to the outbreak of war in November 2020. With the signing of such a lopsided deal, the only risk for the TPLF is sidelining its support base. Meanwhile, in Addis Ababa, a favorable peace deal will strengthen Abiy's hand by stabilizing a fragile economy. While peace will be warmly welcomed by the war-torn country, it will eventually expose the Prime Minister's unfinished reform agenda. The unabated war of the past 2 years has given an excuse to Abiy to indefinitely postpone the promise of radical political reforms that helped bring him to power. With the return of peace, these demands are likely to resurface. Although Abiy introduced some important reforms early in his tenure, he has failed to pursue a genuine and inclusive reform agenda to heal the many political fractures that all the country, instead opting for superficial change that rotate around his own persona. If the tenor of the TPLF's late strongman Meles Zenawi offers any lesson, it is the riskiness of building a political system around a powerful individual. Such a system will stand intact only until the demise of the individual. Indeed, border dispute between regional states, mostly prominently between Amara and Tigray, remains to be resolved. The country is still fighting a guerrilla war against the Oromo Liberation Army, while attacks on ethnic minorities, especially on Amaras in Oromia, continue unabated. As the TPLF and the Ethiopian government start to implement the terms of their agreement, they should do so with the ultimate goal of averting a similar catastrophe in the future. Now is the time to build enduring institutions that can ensure that war will no longer be the means for resolving Ethiopia's political differences. So that is the assessment of this expert, Adisu Lashito. So that is his assessment, and he is advising to avoid war to settle differences. But in Oromia, this is not happening. They are ready to wage a war because Prosperity Party they benefit through war and instability. The next experts, only economic stability can ensure that the peace agreement holds. This one is by Stefan Derkon and Christian Mayer. This is the view of these two experts. After almost 2 years, the government of Ethiopia and the Tigray People's Liberation Front, TPLF, have agreed to stop their violent and destructive conflict and take steps toward political and security stabilization. There are spoilers bent on disrupting this, both inside and outside Ethiopia. One of the biggest likely spoilers, however, is bound to be growing economic instability. The international community, particularly the European Union and the United States, must support the ceasefire agreement by ensuring that there is a large economic upside to peace. The first step must be providing international political and financial support to ensure economic stabilization, followed by support for recovery. It is clear that large parts of northern Ethiopia must be completely rebuilt, with some estimates putting the cost of reconstruction in the next 3 years up to $20 billion. That is thanks to Abiy Ahmed's failed leadership. He waged a war, and that war is costing Ethiopians in blood and in finance. This monumental task is even more challenging given that Ethiopia's microeconomy is currently on the brink of collapse, and not simply because of the cost of the conflict. Like many countries around the world, Ethiopia has been hit and by the global rise in fuel, food, and fertilizer prices. On top of this, rising internal and external debt service costs from the country's infrastructure-led growth model, so applauded across the continent and beyond, adds additional strain. All this translates into a balance of payment crisis and rapid inflation. The black market exchange rate for US dollar is now around 70%, based on our observation in December, above the official exchange rate. International reserves will cover imports for less than 1 month. That is a real crisis. Just less than 1 month. According to an Ethiopian government official, when at least 3 to 4 months is the usual minimal benchmark to avoid payment crisis. So Ethiopia has only 1 month importing capacity. That's a challenge. That's another challenge. Even before the conflict began in late 2020, Ethiopia had started to implement reforms with a view to adopting a more market-led economic model and to stabilize its economy. Discussions were taking place with the International Monetary Fund, IMF, to support this transition. Today, international donors may be tempted to wait for more progress, particularly on accountability for crimes committed during the war. Indeed, based on our private conversations, it is clear that many donors seek blocking all economic and development support, such as limiting IMF, World Bank, or bilateral donor support as a legitimate tool for pressure. They should not delude themselves. Doing so may make matters worse. Without international support and finance, not only will resetting the Ethiopian economy be impossible, but a deepening macroeconomic crisis will put all the gains toward peace and stability at serious risk. That's their argument. Economic policy makers in Ethiopia now face the near impossible task of both restoring the country's macroeconomic stability and investing in reconstruction. Senior Ethiopian government officials told us that they fear they will not be able to pay the oil import bill later in December and next month's civil servants' wages. That's a real crisis coming to Ethiopia. They will not be able to pay civil servants' salaries, and they will not be able to buy oil. This political fallout in Addis Ababa and across the region will be a massive risk for further destabilization. The return of international economic support has to be seen as part of peace-building effort, a way to protect livelihoods, and a means to ensure political stability. The first step has to be an accelerated approval of an IMF program to stabilize the microeconomy, including exchange rate, unification between the official and the parallel markets. It should be accompanied by G20 debt relief and essential multilateral and bilateral finance for stabilization and recovery. A clear road to restoring Ethiopia's participation in the Africa's Growth and Opportunity Act should also be on the agenda. Cessation of conflict, political dialogue, the path toward accountability, and other progress in implementation of the deal be subsequent with the release of funding. How will funding be fairly used in all conflict-affected areas, and how might Eritrea, a belligerent in the conflict but not party to the peace deal, try to benefit from incoming assistance or a broader reconstruction and recovery package? While important, none of these questions should be a barrier to a robust re-engagement. Identifying a clear peace dividend for all parties involved is the surest road to progress in the coming months. So these experts are arguing, engagement with Ethiopia and IMF, World Bank, and others, G20 debt relief, other financial help should be encouraged. If not, Ethiopia will be on the line for collapsing, on the path of collapsing. We will see what these experts are saying. Ethiopia cannot pay civil servants salaries, and they cannot import oil in December or the coming months. That's a crisis. That is a real crisis happening under Abiy Ahmed leadership. The next one is about accountability. Experts for Tigrayans, there can be no lasting peace without accountability. The expert on this one arguing for that is Mehari Tadele Maru. The harrowing experience Tigrayans have suffered at the hands of the Ethiopian and Eritrean militaries and Amara forces bring back painful childhood memories. Tigray was at the center of a protracted civil war in 1970s and 80s, worsened by the Ethiopian famine from 1983 to 1985. Members of my own family, like thousands of others, were victimized by the actions of the Ethiopian military regime and the Tigrayan People Liberation Front (TPLF). While the latest deal gives cause for hope, lived experience reminds me there is a long way to go. Many Tigrayans seem to believe that the Tigray got the short end of the stick in the recent peace agreement signed last month in Pretoria, South Africa. Similarly, some express disquiet that the agreement contains provisions for disarmament of the Tigray Defense Force (TDF), with no attempts to address the root cause of the war. The feeling in Tigray is that with the disbandment of the TDF, the agreement has prepared the ground for exactly what Ethiopia and Eritrea want: a contained, depopulated, and weak Tigray. Indeed, no just peace can be achieved in Tigray as long as the population believes it is under the occupation of military forces it considers alien. This dissatisfaction could lead to the emergence of a political of resentment and discontent that could one day spark conflict, leading to a resumption of various forms of hostilities. More than 5.2 million Tigrayans still are in desperate need of unimpeded, rapid, unconditional, and sustainable delivery of humanitarian aid. Despite the agreement, civilians are still being killed and abducted. Communication and other services such as public transportation remain suspended, and aid trucks are being delayed, and aid is only trickling into limited areas mainly under the control of the Ethiopian and Eritrean forces. The deal sets no timeline for humanitarian access and fails to explicitly mention the withdrawal of Eritrea and Amhara forces from Tigray, which providing strict deadline for disarmament that have already proved extremely hard to meet. It also overlooks the need for building trust, managing political and security issues, and determining the will of the Tigrayan people. Chief among many fundamental shortcomings, the Pretoria deal undermines the much-needed accountability and remedies victims deserve. In its report, an independent UN body set up to investigate atrocities in Ethiopia and other human rights bodies have concluded that crimes against humanity, war crimes, ethnic cleansing, and acts of genocide have been committed during this war. They established the mass starvation, rape, and sexual violence have been used as weapons of war. The UN report further states that widespread acts of rape and sexual violence against Tigrayan women and girls have been committed with the intent to destroy the Tigrayan ethnicity. The deal empowers the Ethiopian domestic justice system to hold perpetrators from Ethiopia and Eritrea to account and dispense justice to victims. Owing to the industrial-scale atrocities committed, a trial of such magnitude would naturally involve naturally involve a large number of victims and state-sponsored perpetrators from two countries. But the Ethiopian justice system has neither the required political independence nor the institutional capability to dispense fair, free, and speedy justice and hold perpetrators accountable. What is more, the overwhelming number of victims, mainly from Tigray, believe Ethiopian judicial institutions are part of and parcel of the war on Tigray and the genocide against Tigrayans. Given that the Ethiopian government and its allies, victims are treated as collateral damage. This sets a dangerous precedent that military victory justifies impunity and the delivery of justice to victims of war crimes is a low priority. More importantly, without accountability, there will be nothing to deter ongoing atrocities in Tigray, Oromia, and elsewhere in the country. Efforts to prevent future atrocities in Ethiopia and across Africa will be undermined. Any lasting peace agreement must be predicated on addressing the root causes of a war, namely providing security against what Tigrayans see an existential threat and assurances that atrocities will not be repeated while respecting the sovereignty of Ethiopia as a country. Above all, the international community should work with the African Union and other partners to quickly set up an international mechanism that can ensure accountability and deliver justice to a staggering number of victims of the recent war. It is essential to sustain peace in Ethiopia and prevent a relapse into conflict. So that's a different argument, assessment on Ethiopia-Tigray relation and from foreign policy.com or foreign policy magazine. So I agree, especially the last one, accountability must be reached. Accountability. Those genociders who committed crimes against humanity, war crimes, all stated crimes must be brought to justice. It is impossible to do it in Ethiopia under Abiy Ahmed. No. The justice system is broken. There is no independent judiciary system under current administration. So it should be international organization or international institution, in Geneva or somewhere. That's the only option at this time. When the government changes, there may be a possibility to try them in Ethiopia, but at the current system, no. So justice, accountability is very important. And the other argument is, the World Bank and IMF to stand with Ethiopia. I agree to help the victims, not to give money for Abiy Ahmed to buy drones and other military hardware. No, I don't support that one. So these are the arguments from foreign policy. It's a very wide assessment. If you are interested, you can check it out, foreignpolicy.com, and you can print it out and keep it for record. That's a very serious assessment on Ethiopia, despite all these other challenges and government intention to wage another war in Oromia. They cannot afford, but they will try. They will try with the limited resources because they don't want stability in that country. This is the last one for today's reading. This is UN Security Council adopt resolution on Burma. This is from U.S. State Department, Anthony Blinken press statement. Let me read. This one is a short one. The United States welcomes the UN Security Council's adaptation of Resolution 2669 on Burma, or Myanmar, another name. This is an important step by Security Council to address the crisis and end the Burma military regime's escalating repression and violence against civilians. It sends a strong message from the international community that the regime must end its violence across the country, release arbitrarily detained prisoners, allow unhindered humanitarian access, protect members of minority groups, and respect the will and the democratic aspiration of the people of Burma. While we applaud the adaptation of this resolution, the Council still has much more work to do to advance a just solution to the crisis in Burma. The Security Council should leverage this opportunity to seek additional ways to promote a return to the path of democracy, advance accountability for the regime's actions, and support ASEAN's effort to achieve meaningful implementation of the 5-point consensus. We remain committed to working with the UN and our international partners, including ASEANs, to end the violence in Burma and seek a peaceful reconciliation to the crisis. So that is U.S. State Department for the crisis in Myanmar or Burma. The military is took power by force and still holding the power by military means, arresting all political oppositions. So that's a good resolution for serious action should follow to stop these military regimes. They don't listen to the papers or press statement. They need stronger actions. So thank you, and let's listen to the videos I selected for you. 2 more videos, I think, then we'll finish today's presentation. Thank you again. Here we go. This is about Comoros.
Will assume the chairmanship of the African Union in 2023, the first time the island nation is being entrusted with the assignment. Comoros was handed the responsibility after Kenya withdrew its bid. President Azali Assoumani and his Kenyan counterpart William Ruto had been separately lobbying for the top post. But following a meeting on the sidelines of the US-Africa Summit last week, Nairobi pulled out. In a statement on Thursday, the Comorian president expressed gratitude to Kenya, saying the decision showed Nairobi's commitment to promoting unity and stability in the East African region. Senegal's president Macky Sall is the current chair of the African Union. The holder of the office chairs the biannual summit meetings of the Assembly and represents the continent in various international fora. This role is different from that of the chairperson of the African Union Commission, currently held by Chadian diplomat Moussa Faki Mahamat.
The President of Ukraine.
It's a great honor for me to be at the U.S. Congress and speak to you and all Americans. Against all odds and doom and gloom scenarios, Ukraine didn't fall. Ukraine is alive and kicking. we defeated Russia in the battle for minds of the world. This struggle will define in what world our children and grandchildren will live, and then their children and grandchildren. It will define whether it will be a democracy of Ukrainians and for Americans for all. Ukraine never asked the American soldiers to fight on our land instead of us. We have artillery. Yes. Thank you. We have it. Is it enough? Honestly, not really. And next year will be a turning point. I know it. The point when Ukrainian courage and American resolve must guarantee the future of our common freedom. The freedom of people who stand for their values. May God protect our brave troops and citizens. May God forever bless the United States of America. Merry Christmas and happy, victorious New Year. Slava Ukraini!
Okay, so that is a very inspiring speech by Zelensky, Ukraine's president, and a warm welcome in U.S. Congress. He got no that much shortage of support, financial, political, weaponry. He got no shortage, no shortage. The challenge is all this support he's getting from United States and other Western countries is not saving the country. I talked about this many times. The country is burning by Russian bombardment. So that's a challenge. That's a challenge. I said, I don't know, they should reconsider to join Ukraine forces to fight against Russia. That's the only thing you can stop the burning of that country, not by just pouring money and weapons and political support. No, that will not stop Russia bombardment and the burning of the city. And so please call upon the Prime Minister and talk to your representative or governors to call upon Ethiopian government to release university students and others who recently massively detained for protesting peacefully against the atrocities happening in Oromia region. So please call upon him to release and to allow these students to come back to learning and teaching environment. They are detained massively, and I don't know how many jails this guy has. He's spending money to build jails, those legal and illegal prison cells in that country, just for the sake of his power. And he is destroying the youngest mind, the future, the hope of the future for that country. He is abusing them, torturing them in jail. So please call upon him to release and be the voice for them on whenever you have the opportunity. And the other thing is, please act, be the voice against the planned military operation on Oromia in coming days or weeks or months. There is a planning, as I said. I read the news for you, and there is a planning, strong planning to wage a bloody war in Oromia. These people, they don't have the resources, but they will use their limited resources to create more bloodshed in Oromia. So we have to continue our protest. We have to continue our campaign against these atrocities. the Sweden Oromo diaspora community came out and protested and became the voice. Thank you, Sweden Oromo community, and it should continue. Please don't be tired. Our people are dying. Our people are suffering by under Abiy Ahmed leadership, by Fano and Amara militia cross-border atrocities, and by their intention of crossing into Oromia region and taking the land. So we should stand against this expansionist agenda and drone strikes and planned military operation on Oromos. So please be the voice and lobby against this military operation and continue your struggle until this dying regime in Ethiopia, as the economist suggested, the regime that cannot afford to pay salary for public servant, can't import oil, and full of other problems. We should continue our pressure until this system is removed, until the Prime Minister and his close associates are forced to resign and face justice in that country. That's all I'm going to say for today. Thank you, and have a nice weekend. So long, everyone.